Hi, I'm James Neibaur, and I'm very happy to be on the Jim Masters Show. Ali and I are going to be talking about my 37th book, The Laurel and Hardy Films, a film by film study of the great comedies of Mr. Stan Laurel and Mr. Oliver Hardy, my buddy over here. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion with my friend Jim. So, hey, let's get going.
Hey, James,
Hey,
welcome to
Jim,
the
how you doing?
Jim. We got two Jameses here, right? James and Jim times two. Good to have you with us, coming to us from Racine, Wisconsin, right? Beautiful Wisconsin,
Yeah, where everything's happening.
where everything is happening. And you are a tremendous and revered film historian, educator, author. Matter of fact, you taught for over 30 years, didn't you?
Yeah, I was a special education teacher. I'm retired from that now, but yeah, that was my career. That's that was the real job.
That was the. So, when did you first? And we're going to talk, folks. We are very excited. We're going to be talking about celebrating the films of Laurel and Hardy. And he is a tremendous film historian, but he has written books on Jerry Lewis and I mean, so many other people, and he's working on lots of cool books he was telling me about now that, we'll probably have him back on the show for. But this is his 37th book, and we're very excited about it. And it is the Laurel and Hardy Films, and it's a film by film, in depth study, an analysis that James does painstakingly for all of us as we celebrate Laurel and Hardy. But for you as an educator, and of course, a wonderful author, when did you first get interested in film and some of these legends of our time, my friend?
Well, it happened when, believe it or not, when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. My mom picked me up from school. I was only a little kindergarten kid, so she picked me up from school, and we only went half days, and so we stopped at the store, the grocery store, on the way home, and suddenly they, you know, put the microphone that piped in the Muzak stuff in the background. They put it over to the radio, and throughout the store they were announcing the assassination, and everything just stopped, sort of like a freeze frame. I mean, boom, like that, and everybody stopped and listened. And it was the first time I'm a little kid. It was the first time I actually saw grown-ups cry. Well, the following weekend, there was nothing on except coverage, like the funeral and everything else. So my parents took us to the movies, my brother and I to the movies, and it was a Jerry Lewis movie. Now, this was the first time I was ever in a movie theater. That's how young I was. And there was this huge screen. We had to sit way up in the balcony because the theater was just jammed with people, all having the same idea. And the Jerry Lewis movie comes on, and people are just rocking in their seats with laughter. Now, I never saw a movie with a crowd before. So I had seen funny movies, but, on television. And they were just roaring with laughter. And my young mind realized that silly guy was making all these people happy during a very sad time. And I suddenly realized, I might have not been able to articulate it very well at that age, the power of movies and the power of comedy. And from that point on, it became a developing fascination for me. And I had a very ordinary childhood, with playing ball and riding a bicycle and all that, like everybody does. But in my own free time, I would try to find older, funny movies on television and go to the library and look for books to learn about these old movies. And where are these people now? Some of them, a lot of them, were still alive. Some of them were still active. We're talking early '60s, and it actually was more just a curious interest as a kid. but it developed so much and then later expanded to include non-comedy older films, and more was getting written about them, that by the time I was 16 years old, I was getting paid, because that's the early 70s when all the nostalgia stuff was going on. And I was getting paid to write articles about movies and film history for film collector magazines and things like that. And it really just developed from there.
Really amazing.
Yeah,
And
I got to tell Jerry Lewis this story at his house when I did the book with him. So
you were at the house, you were on the boat. I
yeah.
mean, you've got this wonderful collection of stories with Jerry Lewis. When did the fascination with our beloved Laurel and Hardy develop for you, to where you wanted to really take a deep dive, taking a look, of course, at them, the individuals, but also their incredible films and the years and years of amazing films. It's amazing when you think about the amount of output that they had that we can still enjoy now. Of course, for everybody watching, Laurel and Hardy were a legendary comedy duo from the silent and early sound eras of Hollywood. And that partnership consisted of Stan Laurel, the bumbling and innocent foil, and Oliver Hardy, the pompous and fastidious straight man. And the pair starred in 107 films together between 1927 and 1950, and widely regarded as one of the greatest comedy teams in film history. And they formed together at the Hal Roach Studios in 27. And prior to that, both had worked independently in film and vaudeville. But and they even appeared in some of the same movies as early as 1921. But they didn't officially become a double act until Hal Roach, the producer, noticed their undeniable comedic chemistry. And we're sort of celebrating them here with film historian James Neibaur joining us. And for you, we all love Laurel and Hardy, but when did it become a fascination for you? And what are some of the things early on that you learned about them and about the movie?
Well, when I was maybe 7 years old, I'm quite young, and I was just starting to get into the films, from that experience I just told you about. Um, I was lying in bed, it was at night, and I was lying in bed, and I heard the Laurel and Hardy music coming from the living room, the TV in the living room. And back then, if they like ended like, I would imagine Dad was watching a ball game and there was like a gap of like 20 minutes to fill after the game until the next program. And they threw on a Laurel and Hardy. And when I heard the funny music, it like sounded like something that was funny, that was silly, the dot dot dot. And so I yelled out, "What is that?" And my mom yelled back, "Laurel and Hardy." And somehow it sounded familiar. I must have heard about it or seen about it. God, remember, this is so far back. Laurel was alive. So my mom said, "You can come out and watch a little if you want." Not knowing that, they had no idea that it was only a little 20-minute short comedy. And I got up. It was a movie called Bratz from 1930, one of their funniest pictures from the sound era. And I got up and watched it. And I still remember laughing at it with my parents. We were all laughing together at the movie. And that's when I connected with Laurel and Hardy. And they weren't just funny. I mean, I knew the Three Stooges, things like that. And they would, as children's entertainment, they would show like silent movies with really obtrusive music and sound effects. They would market those old silent comedies like that as children's entertainment, like cartoons on Saturday morning. So I saw some of those too, Keystone Cop type stuff. But Laurel and Hardy, for some reason, they weren't just funny. You somehow connected with them. There's something about just being in the company of those characters that had a warm and relaxing feeling. And the movie was also very, very funny with a lot of slapstick, which is a very valid form of comedy, especially for somebody as young as I was. And from that point on, anytime they were on, I tried to connect with them. When I was probably as young as maybe 9 or 10, there was a show on a Chicago station on Sundays where it was like 2 hours, it might have been 2.5 hours of Laurel and Hardy movies where they'd show a whole feature and then a short subject after it. So I got to see more and more of their films. And then when I was maybe 11 or 12, I got a birthday present. It was a book called The Films of Laurel and Hardy. And it was a book that was mostly pictures, but still some copy, some discussion by a guy named William K. Everson, a film historian who I later got to know as a friend, a real nice man. And it allowed me to see that I had seen nearly all of the sound Laurel and Hardy movies over the years, as a kid. And there were many silents that they made, and I had not seen any of those. So suddenly, maybe when I was 12 or 13, I was at the library and I saw a bunch of 8 millimeter movies there of old silent movies. And there were some that were Laurel and Hardy. Well, my dad had an 8 millimeter movie projector for home movies of the family. So I thought, "Hey, I can actually check these out like books and see the Laurel and Hardy silence on my dad's screen in the living room." It's like a level of nirvana I haven't since experienced. So I brought some of them. I remember the first one I brought home was Bacon Grabbers, a 1929 silent, one of their last silent films there. In fact, second to last silent. And I watched it. I had every friend in the neighborhood over to watch it. We must have watched it like 8 times in the week that I had it checked out from the library. And then after that, like one or two friends would come with me and say, "Oh, here's one. Oh, here's the Laurel and Hardy." And then, "Oh, here's Charlie Chaplin." And we were all watching silent movies, in my basement, just to discover that. Then we started extending and discovering other things like The Troublesome Secretaries with John Bunny, 1911, and we're like, wow. And it was like a real, now for the kids, it was just a kid thing to do. They were my friends. We were all laughing and having a good time together. They didn't like have an interest beyond that, but beyond the superficial entertainment. Whereas me, I was learning stuff. I was, okay, John Bunny, who's he? And how far back does this go? And where's the first Laurel and Hardy movie? And all that stuff was like fascinating to me. And I was reading about it. And like I said, by the time I was 16, they were paying me to write about it.
How cool is that, huh?
Yeah.
So it was the theme song, the music that you heard sort of off in the background that sort of
Yeah.
lured you in, which is amazing. It's, we've had a lot of guests on who are in the music world, session musicians, composers, and others as well, who have been involved in jingles and theme songwriting and film scoring and things of that nature. And we've talked about the power and importance of the music in television, in film, the underscoring when you're going from scene to scene or when a scene is being elevated to sort of enhance the mood. But the same thing with film, and of course sound effects too, a lot of the sound effects
Yeah.
that were used. But these were times where the music and the actual theme was, almost equivalent to the content. When you heard the theme to a movie, a short, long form television show, you knew what was coming. You knew what to expect. It was going to be something in line with what you wanted, whether it was comedy or thriller or drama. And that music, you can hum along with it. If they had lyrics, you can sing, the theme to All in the Family or whatever it is, you knew. And we don't necessarily have that as much now, and all the jingles and all those things that we love so much and cherish and celebrate. But I can understand and appreciate that, because there are some things that the theme music attracted me to it. And then I took a deeper dive into whatever it was and fell in love with it. And I'm like, how perfect that music is representing the tone and feel of what I'm seeing. And that's what happened for you early on. And when
Yeah.
you talk about these movies, so many films, like I said, like over somewhere around 107. And just looking at this, of course, is Duck Soup. We're talking about 1927. You talk about that one too in the book, right?
Oh, absolutely. Every one of the films gets its own chapter. Duck Soup is interesting because they had appeared in a Stan Laurel solo film where Hardy played like a gangster holding him up, a crook, and That's called Lucky Dog, and that was in 1921. And Hardy just happened to have a role in a Laurel movie. Well, in Duck Soup, they were another guy was playing Hardy's part, was going to play Hardy's part, and he couldn't, and so Hardy took his place. And so we're looking at that as sort of like the first Laurel and Hardy movie. They were more co-stars per se, rather than an official team, but they operated as a team in that movie, in a sense that there were some like elements of the Laurel and Hardy relationship on screen that was very much a part of their characters when they had developed and become a actual team later on, an official team later on. But after they made Duck Soup, they made several films together, more as co-stars. Sometimes they were adversarial. Sometimes, one would have a bigger part than the other, but they just happened to be in the same movies. And as the story goes, Leo McCarey, the great director, was working for Roach at the time, and he noticed that there was a chemistry there. There was something going on where they kind of worked well together. So they would purposely do films in which they both would appear together. And from that, they developed a lot of different quirks and traits and playing off of each other to the point where they became an official comedy team. Now, Hardy, who had just been a character actor, was all for that. I mean, that was an advancement for him. Laurel, who had been a starring solo comic, wanted to get away from acting and just concentrate on writing and directing. But eventually, he saw that this was a good opportunity for both of them. And with every Laurel and Hardy movie, there are different writers and directors credited, but it's really Stan Laurel's vision. I mean, he sort of like contributed to the script, got together with the gag men, directed the director per se. Laurel and Hardy then became the Laurel and Hardy that we understood. But throughout their career, they kept honing their act. And when I say that Stan Laurel was sort of supervising everything, while true, Oliver Hardy's contribution can't be downplayed. As an actor and as a contributor to the films, there's some of us who believe that Oliver is even funnier than Stan.
I could see that. Yes, exactly. Because a lot of the things would happen to him. He would be the one sort of, I always equated them a little bit to the Ed Norton, Ralph Cramden
Oh,
relationship,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Jackie Gleason, Art Carney relationship in a way, loosely, the Fred Flintstone, Barney Rubble. I mean, there are some feelings,
Gilligan and Skipper.
Gilligan and Skipper. It makes sense, right?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they
Well,
were the
all of those later
groundbreakers.
things were influenced by them as the foundational comedy.
You know who has always talked a lot about Stan Laurel, and who's always, he said, taken a lot from him, is the incredible Dick Van Dyke.
Dick Van Dyke turns 100 in December, and he's doing so well. I don't know him, but I have friends. We have mutual friends, and he's doing so well. And some people, Jim, should just be allowed to live forever.
Yes, Dick Van Dyke is one, sure. Carol Burnett,
Yeah, I know.
Barbara Eden, who just turned 94. I mean,
She looks great.
some of these wonderful people who are just iconic and warm and friendly.
Yeah,
But Dick Van Dyke has always credited Stan Laurel.
yeah,
He had always been an admirer of his and got to chat with him several times. And some
yeah.
of his loose moves and just the way he was so nimble. It's funny because Stan Laurel always, to a degree, also reminded me of Fred Astaire, even in the way he looks, a little bit like he could be related to Fred Astaire a little bit. Do you see that?
Well, I've never thought of anything like that, but now that you say it,
Yeah.
um, Laurel had a command of his performance the way Mr. Astaire had a command of his dance moves. And they were both very brilliant at what they did, and they both had a real concentration and creativity and seriousness about their craft. And it came out in the work. It showed up in the work.
Absolutely right. And there was the physicality and the resemblance is uncanny too. Now, Tell us about your process in, preparing the book. Again, this is book number 37. Um, what is it like taking the deep dive that you do into these films, into their story of Laurel and Hardy? There's been a lot of, shows and documentaries and other books, things that have come along the way about Laurel and Hardy themselves, their individual lives, being a duo, some of the movies. But to actually do it in such a thoughtful and in-depth, deep dive way, what was that process like? And describe how this is different than anything else people may have consumed when it comes to Laurel and Hardy and their films.
Oh, absolutely. In the case of Laurel and Hardy, I avoided doing a book on them for many, many years. I've written many books before I wrote one on Laurel and Hardy. And that's because there are so many books that I thought I couldn't say anymore. And then I thought about it a lot, and I realized this was a book that I had to do for various reasons. And so I thought to myself that I could probably do approach where I looked at their films as cinema per se, where it wasn't a lot of pictures or a lot of background information. And well, there was some of that. There's both pictures and background information, but the concentration would be the films as cinema. What made them work? What made them tick? Their development from this to this. Laurel and Hardy had to transition from silent to sound films. They did it successfully. From short films to feature-length films, they did that successfully. And then when comedy completely changed in the 1940s, where it was no longer the silent era type of slapstick and methodical pacing that they had done for their entire teaming up to that point, in 1940, things changed. It was more the rat-a-tat dialogue-oriented cynical comedy of Bob Hope or Abbott and Costello, who became very, very popular. And a lot of the comedians who had been in silent movies and worked through the 30s, by the time the 1940s came, I mean, Buster Keaton just finished doing short comedies for Columbia and was a gag man at MGM at the time. Harry Langdon was doing shorts, and he died in 1944. W.C. Fields made his last film in 1941, and then just did supporting parts until his death in 46. The Marx Brothers had stopped making movies in 41, and then didn't come back until towards the end of the decade. Harold Lloyd, 1938, and didn't come back until 1947. So during those 40s, those great comedians were sort of like off to the side over here in smaller projects. Laurel and Hardy were so popular that they were hired by a major studio to make feature films still. 20th Century Fox hired them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to transition to a whole different kind of comedy. They maintained the essence of their characters and their style, but there was a little more dialogue and a little more of this and that was a little different, but they did so successfully. There are some people who have tried to argue that those are not good films. They're better than their reputation.
Right. I like that's a good way to put it. I also like this that you did. This is something really
Oh, yeah.
special. Tell
Yeah.
us about this.
I'm also an artist. Yeah. That drawing was sold in one of my gallery shows
Wow.
several years ago. I drew that probably 15 years ago. And yeah, I'm a professional artist off to the side. I have gallery shows in that, and I had to draw them, that. So,
That's how long did it take?
oh, gee, I don't know. Not too long, just a few hours. I did it in one sitting.
Is it all pencil? I mean, what's the process?
Okay. Yeah, no, I sketched it out in pencil, and
Yeah,
then I inked it in and used markers for the color enhancement. And it's on yellow paper. I thought that would bring out enhance it kind of. So
absolutely. Really incredible. Talking more about the films, but just them, Laurel and Hardy. When we talk about Abbott and Costello. We had Chris Costello, Lou Costello's daughter on,
Yeah, I know
and
Chris. Yeah.
she's wonderful.
Yes,
And
excellent.
we had a great conversation, and she keeps his memory alive and the memory of Abbott Costello alive. And, and she's also so responsive to the fans and
Yeah.
also the aficionados. We saw Laurel and Hardy in New York, on Channel 5, Channel 9, Channel 11. Same thing with Abbott and Costello and the Three Stooges and all of them. Mighty Joe Young, Godzilla, all of that. Channel 9 was the one for Godzilla, WOR-TV, New York.
Yeah.
But just the characters and where they place in the annals of history of film, cinema, entertainment, comedy. Where do you see them in your eyes, and why do you think there is this indelible nature about them? Why people still love hearing about them, learning about them, reading about them, and watching them all these years later?
During my teaching years, and now I had kids that were, from a completely different era than me, as my students, of course. And during my teaching years, as a treat, every once in a while, if, they did good or accomplished something, um, I would show reel to reel films of a 16 millimeter projector. And I'd stick on a reel of film and show it up against like the wall and, or a screen if they had screens. And we would see things like Laurel and Hardy. And these kids, now, towards the end of my career, I was teaching special education and they were behavior issues. So I was teaching gang members with parole officers that were teenagers, high school level. So it was a pretty challenging group of students. And we got through to them and worked well with them. And there's a lot of accomplishments. That's, a whole nother story at how well that worked out. But one of the things that all the students, whether I was teaching college placement kids or, low level kids who needed more academic understanding, I would show films like Laurel and Hardy, and they would just love them. Laurel and Hardy were especially popular. And they would say, can we watch a movie with the fat guy and the skinny guy again, type of thing. And sometimes these were kids that didn't really have a lot in their regular lives. And so we tried to give them, not only the academics, but, a comfortable place to be during the time they're in school. So we would do little things like, run a movie or something like that, just a short movie on a Friday. And when we'd show something like Laurel and Hardy, it really connected to this other generation. It's like, a completely different generation from me, maybe a couple. So that showed me how Laurel and Hardy were timeless. And as far as them themselves, if you look at them as characters or as actors, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy created characters where they weren't just funny. Somehow they made you love them. And that's something that takes a special kind of talent.
It really, really does. And how would you describe their personalities off camera, off set? Um, were they similar to their personas on film from what you've observed, or were they completely the opposite? Sometimes it's surprising to viewers or what have you that the people that they enjoy are completely the opposite until the light goes on and then they become that character. They take on that role beautifully. How would you describe them?
Well, Oliver Hardy was very interested in sports. When he was done with shooting his scenes, he would like to, golf and do, things like that and get into that sort of thing. And he had his own group of friends that he, worked with and everything outside of his films. And Stan Laurel, he would do, like I said, go into the editing room and cut the films so that they timed just right. And Laurel played, Stanley was sort of a meek, dopey, funny kind of character, but Stan Laurel himself was a very intelligent, serious guy. He had a wonderful sense of humor and loved to laugh, and he was very, very funny and creative. But he also was a very highly intelligent man and highly talented man. And Oliver Hardy was also very intelligent in the way he would approach his character and had that innate ability to know when to do this or that. One of the things that defines Ali's character is every once in a while he'll be doing something and you'll look at the screen as if he's looking at us, as if he knows we're watching, and he's like, "Look what I'm putting up with here." And
Breaking the fourth wall, right? Yeah.
right, exactly.
One of the
And
first to do that. Yeah.
yeah, I think he was like the guy to really do that. And that takes a creative vision that I don't think anybody had to tell him. I think he had that. Yeah, it was just there. And so I think they were very intelligent, creative men who created some very delightful and funny characters.
And so many noteworthy films as well. The Music Box in 1932, which won the Academy Award for Best Live Action Short. Big Business in 29, added to the U.S. National Film Registry. Sons of the Desert, 1933, also the National Film Registry. And Way Out West back in 1937, another fantastic one. Do you have, of all of their incredible films, and there's so many of them, do you have a favorite or two that stand out for you? Or do you just love them all?
It's really hard. Some are better than others, but I argue in my book that there's no bad Laurel and Hardy movie. There isn't one which, oh boy, they missed with this one. None of them are like that. There's always something. There is no Laurel and Hardy that you put before an audience where they would be disappointed. There are some that are simply better than others. And of all the Laurel and Hardy films, it would be really difficult to pick a favorite. It would even be difficult to pick a favorite short or a favorite silent or a favorite feature because they have so many at such a high level. And plus, there's also the subjective feeling of liking something beyond its capacity just because it connects better with you. There's a film called Pack Up Your Troubles, which is one of their feature films, their second feature length film. And I love that one at the same level as their tip top greatest films that are considered greatest, generally. And the reason for that, I couldn't really describe. It just is that much funnier and hits me that way that I just love it. I think it's very funny and very moving in a lot of ways. And it's one of those films that just simply has everything that I think a film needs to have. So I think that one might be my favorite feature, even though objectively it's not as good as Sons of the Desert or Way Out West, but subjectively it's the one I enjoy the most.
What are those top films from your perspective of the many that they did over 107? Wow.
Well, in the silent era, I'd have to pick out two tars where they get in the traffic jam and wreck each other's all the different
Mm.
cars. Big Business, which you just mentioned, I would certainly include as well. And among their sound short films, The Music Box, absolutely, the Oscar winner you talked about. And there's some films like Helpmates and Hog Wild, and that are very, very funny. They even have the one time they did a sequel. They did a movie called Them Thar Hills, where they go out in the woods to cure Ali's, bad foot and gout and everything. And they meet up with a couple and they get in a tussle with the guy. And then in the next, well, maybe not the next movie, but another movie they made after that, there was a sequel to Them Thar Hills where they meet up with that same guy. They open up an electrical shop, and next door is a grocery store owned by that guy and his wife. So the fight starts all over again. And that's particularly amusing.
Them There Hills, I remember that one too. That How did you learn anything about how they came up with the titles for the films as well?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different titles to a lot of their different movies, and sometimes they would be titled differently in other countries, like even England, which same language, but it didn't translate as well. Like a movie called Hog Wild, that was an expression in America, but in England it wasn't. So they called it aerial antics because they're putting up an aerial in the movie. So things like that are really interesting with the titles. There is a sort of an all-purpose title called The Rap, which different Laurel and Hardy films were planning to use, and then it was changed. Significantly, their first feature film, Pardon Us, where they play guys that get, they get in trouble with prohibition and end up in prison. And with Pardon Us, they even had some early articles about the making of the film in the Hollywood trade magazines where it was referred to as The Rap. So what's interesting about the titles is that they'd go through a few different ones often until they landed on one that they liked best.
You mentioned Music Box. That is another one that stands out, I think, as a favorite among everybody as well, and critically acclaimed. Tell us a little bit about your research in that one, as you included that in your book too, going back to 1932.
Yeah, Laurel and Hardy, the entire plot of the movie is Laurel and Hardy are assigned to deliver a piano to a home that rests atop a long, long flight of stairs.
Already, there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They carry it up just so far. A nursemaid is coming down with a baby buggy, and so they have to bring it all the way down. And then, then they run into a guy that wants them to move the piano so he can pass. And they ask him to walk around, and he gets mad because he's so privileged. And in the tussle, the piano gets knocked and goes down the stairs, and they have to go get it again. One of the funniest things in the film is when they finally get it to the top, a delivery man is up there and says, did you bring that piano all the way up these stairs? And they said, yeah. And he goes, you didn't have to do that. There's a road you can go that goes all the way to the top here. And Ali looks at Stan and says, now, why didn't we think of that? And they bring the piano all the way down. It's at its destination. They bring it all the way back down the stairs so they could drive it up on that road. That's genius.
It is. Also too in the movies, just like with the Three Stooges, the Marx Brothers, and some of Abbott and Costello, but especially too with Laurel and Hardy, the physicality that it took to do some of these things that they did was extraordinary as well, wasn't it? In these
Well,
films.
yeah, Ali usually got the brunt of the slapstick. And there's even an interview quote where he talks about he doesn't think anybody, got dunked in as many mud puddles or did this or did that. And then finally says to the interviewer, I think I earned my money. So, and that's true. And with there's a lot of great slapstick. I mean, the Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, all performed wonderful slapstick. And Laurel and Hardy, though, they had a certain style, a certain method that was so relaxed and careful that it's just, I guess I think it's above and beyond all the other great comedians, not to put those other ones down because I love them all. But there's just something special about their method, their presentation, their delivery that sets them apart and makes their approach that much funnier.
Is there an innocence to it as well? When you hear that theme song, when you watch them, there is this playful innocence that you get. They don't go too heavy in any particular directions. It's very evergreen. So you can, like I Love Lucy, you could watch these over and over and over again, and they don't specifically delve into anything that's topical of the day, though all relatable to the things that we get involved in sometimes in our lives. And of course, in a more dramatic level, the way all of these fantastic people portrayed it, whether it's Lucille Ball or, Laurel and Hardy or all the others, more dramatic version of our everyday lives. But do you think it is that also the innocence, the playfulness, and the that purity to it that they seem to be able to master as well. I mean, kids can watch, seniors can watch, every member of the family can sit and watch and enjoy it without any problem.
That's the thing about Laurel and Hardy. I told you that no matter what type of student I was working with over a 30-year teaching career, if I would throw on a Laurel and Hardy film as sort of like a treat, like I said, and they would respond the same way, think it was hilarious. And no matter what walk of life one comes from, what income level, whether you're male, female, old, or young, Laurel and Hardy are funny. They're going to make you laugh, no matter how old they are. I mean, when I showed to the students, I would say ahead of time, I go, this is sort of like history because it's a black and white movie. The clothes will be different. The cars will be different. Some of the things they say will be sayings that are no longer used nowadays. But their humor, of course, in those days was clean. You can show it to anybody and not worry about anything, reactive. And when I would use them in the classroom and show kids as young as like 11 or 12 and as old as 17 or 18 in my teaching years, no matter what area I was teaching at the time, because, I taught all over the place. They would always respond very well to how funny they were and how much their characters would connect with us. They would have a simple task, delivering a piano, that sort of thing, putting up an aerial. And they would spend 20 or 30 minutes with all different obstacles and making each one funny and never making it seem monotonous, always building, always maintaining. And it was just so brilliantly done that it really transcends all time and generations, any age group, any income level, anything. It's just that good.
How long, I agree. How long did it take you to start to write the book? Because I mean, you take a real deep dive and you treat it with such care and respect in such a beautiful way that whether you are an aficionado, somebody who knows everything, you feel you know everything there is to know about these films and about Laurel and Hardy will appreciate it. But somebody who maybe knows a little bit about them, or somebody, different generation who's heard Laurel and Hardy, but has never seen the films, never really digested the content. How were you able to write it in the way that it appeals to everybody? And what was the digging like, the exhaustive research to put it all together? Because again, you do a film by film analysis and breakdown, and they had a lot of films.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There. And well, what keeps it interesting is Laurel and Hardy's different transitions that I was talking about earlier, but also the fact that how they kept developing their characters. The first time they did this and they kept it in the act, that type of thing. Like the first time Hardy says, "Here's another nice mess you've got me into," or the first time Laurel does his little cry. Those are all documented as you watch the films. Now, I had watched these films many times. There weren't any Laurel and Hardy films I had not seen when I started writing the book. But this is the first time I watched them in chronological order and saw them film by film as they were made or as they were released, where you could understand how the development happened and really like reveal the extra brilliance that went on between the two actors, the two comedians. And when I write a book, the first thing I do is gather all the materials I'll need, all of the books I want to reference, all of the films I need to watch. Those I already had. And books, for the most part, I had pretty much anything written on them that I would need access to. And also outlets for where I could find like articles. There's a lot of things online where you can look at the trade magazines and the newspapers of the time where you can read reviews. And there's this wonderful thing in a magazine, trade magazine from way back then called the Motion Picture Herald, where it's called What the Picture Did for Me. And it's a whole like 4-page section of every magazine that came out of theater owners from around the country writing to the trade magazine and talking about how their patrons responded to the movies. So if you want to look up the music box. You type that in a search, and all the different theater owners at the time will be talking about how the music box played at their theater. And that I included a lot of that because what a fascinating look at how people themselves were responding to these movies at the time of their release. What a wonderful resource to have. What an extra piece of the puzzle that offers. So I made sure I included that. I mean, one report for a movie called, I think it was The Dancing Masters, was from one of the internment camps from during World War II. That movie was shown, and the director of the internment camp talked about how well it went over. Isn't that amazing? I mean,
Mhm.
fascinating.
It really is. Usually that's what they call us when we're at weddings, my family, the dancing masters. So we're partial to that one. But of course, you always see this one coming out, especially around holiday time, Babes in Toyland. This is something quite special. This is, I think, probably one of the more widely known universally films of Laurel and Hardy. Tell us about this.
Oh, okay. Uh, there's a lot to Babes in Toyland. In fact, a friend of mine, Randy Scratfoot, wrote an entire book just on this movie because there's so much about its production, its creation, and its presentation, distribution, how well it's lasted over time, etc. Fascinating book that I recommend. But anyway, Babes in Toyland, which was later retitled March of the
March
Wooden
of the Wooden
Soldiers
Soldiers,
because
right?
Disney remade it. Has had perennial television showings. And when I think it was high school, they ran it, it played theaters. They ran it in theaters. And me and a friend of mine went because, and it was packed with families and kids. So we went to it, and it was so fascinating to hear like families and kids laughing at this old movie. And I'm always happy when younger people connect with older movies because that's what keeps them alive over time and generations. And they won't just fade away if younger generations connect with them. So, March of the Wooden Soldiers, aka Babes in Toyland, was this big, lavish, hilarious musical that's, really opened up. It has the Victor Herbert songs and all of the different characters, like Bo Peep and the evil Barnaby, played by the wonderful Henry Brandon, and of course Laurel and Hardy, the central figures. And it's just so funny and uplifting and exciting, and you always feel better after watching it. And for a movie like that, that's the type of film that I think could get an annual theater run around Christmas time and do very, very well.
That's a great idea. I think that's a terrific idea because we've seen it, often on television, especially around the holidays. March of the Wooden Soldiers, Babes in Toyland, and it does just make you think about childhood and good times and family and the holidays and just certain movies when they come on sort of harken those warm feelings. And Laurel and Hardy does that for people as well, no matter, I think, whatever the film is. The process too, when you think about it, um, like a lot of these early ones were done during the Depression when there wasn't a lot of money out there floating for productions or to even go to movie theaters or what have you. Did you learn anything about how they were able to do what they did during a time of depression?
Well, what's great is the era of the Depression, one of the things that people could afford was a night at the movies because movies were very, very inexpensive. Not like today, you got to bring your mortgage. But
Right.
back then, you could watch a movie for very little money, and even bring the family, and it wouldn't be a lot of money. And that was the escapism. And they didn't want to see a serious, sad, heavy drama for the most part because their lives were heavy drama at that time. They wanted to see something that was more escapism. So when they could go and see Laurel and Hardy and laugh and forget about their troubles, that Laurel and Hardy kept America happy, kept them cheerful during something as difficult as the Depression. And that's one of the greatest things a comedian can do is make somebody happy when times are tough. I have to share a personal story. It's in my book, but just for the program here. Uh, Sadly, I lost my wife to leukemia when she was only 26 years old. And when I was in the hospital after she had died, I left her room just sobbing as hard as I could ever cry. And I wandered aimlessly down the hospital corridor and finally went into a waiting room to sort of collect myself. And I sat down and I looked up at the TV, and I know it was just a coincidence, but there was a Laurel and Hardy movie on the television. And I said to myself, you know what? Those reassuring faces tell me that somehow I'm going to make it through this. And I did. And I know it's all coincidental, but it means something to me.
You know, it's with you in spirit, with us right now in spirit. Probably having a few laughs with the two of them up there, saying, "If you know, my husband was a huge fan of yours, wrote about you," and they're like, "We know, we know." Uh, Thanks for sharing that story. How not coincidental. It was, I think, a gift maybe for that to be what you saw on the screen. There's a reason for everything. And sometimes a certain song comes on or
Yeah.
a movie comes on or something, a scent of something that reminds you. And in this case, for it to be that, and then for you, all these years later, for you to write about him and
Yeah.
the movies, it's just something really beautiful. Do you think, with all of these incredible films and everything that they've done, do you think Laurel and Hardy really embraced the characters, appreciated it, and understood how people felt about them? Sometimes, in these industries, as we know, people are typecast or they're always playing those roles, and then they walk away from it and they never want to see or hear about it again. They don't want to go to reunions. They don't want to go to Hollywood events. They don't want to do interviews about those characters because they did it so long. They don't want to be typecast just as that. Now, those are very strong, prolific characters that the two of them took on for, long time, that are still relevant today. Do you think that they appreciated that from anything you understood or dug in your deep dive, and really appreciated how people felt about that?
Well, actually, they kept working after they made movies. They went on tour and all over the world, in fact. And they kept working until illness stopped them. In fact, after they did the tours, they were all set to do a television show. There were articles in the newspapers, and they were all ready to, put something together and start shooting. And then Laurel had a slight stroke. Well, he recovered completely, and they were going to get back into that project. And then Hardy suffered a stroke, and he took off a lot of weight and tried to get back in shape. But then his health continued to suffer, and we sadly lost him in August of 1957. So unfortunately, the television show idea never got to happen. But no, Laurel and Hardy would have kept working, after movies. They made their last American film in 1945. They came back and did another film in another country in 1950. And then after that, they continued to tour and eventually had that TV project coming up. So they did keep working, and they did keep up as a team. And even after Hardy died, Laurel would occasionally create little Laurel and Hardy gags and share them with his friends, for a laugh, because his creative mind needed to keep doing that. Laurel never appeared without Hardy after he died. I'm sure you know the movie "It's a Mad, 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 Mad World."
One
Well,
of my favorite, yes.
there's that scene where Jack Benny drives up and looks, and I think Milton Berle and Terry Thomas are fighting, and he asks, anything wrong? And they're like, get out of here, type of thing. And Benny goes, well, and drives away. That was originally for Stan. He was going to drive up in his little derby and everything, and ask him if he could help or whatever. And when they say get out of here, ooh, and drive away, and that would have been hilarious. But he said no. Stanley Kramer went to see him, and he invited him in, and they sat and talked. But Laurel said, I don't want to do this. If Hardy was alive and they could pull up together, he probably would have done it. But he just couldn't do it without Babe. Hardy's nickname, Ollie.
Exactly. So they remained friends to the end.
Yes.
That's great for people who have ever wondered that, because sometimes, we've heard like Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, and then they rekindled their friendship in later years with that surprise telethon visit from Dean Martin, live, unscripted. But yeah, that's good to know. Stanley Kramer, It's a Mad World, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Prolific director, producer. His daughter Catherine is a friend of ours, and she was on the show recently. And you can see that in the archives on our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. But she talked about her dad and talked about, the amount of movies and product that Stanley Kramer is responsible for is extraordinary too.
No, he was a true master, Stanley Kramer.
Now, Stan and Oliver, did they produce, direct, write? Was there any of that in their background, or were they just, from your understanding, strictly great performers?
Well, as I said to you before, Stan Laurel directed. The director was in on the editing, and was very much a part of all that throughout all the films they made for the Hal Roach Studios. Hardy was more an actor, but a very creative and very brilliant one. And he would contribute something, but Laurel was pretty much the one. And Hardy was content to leave it to Stan because he understood Stan's level of talent. So there are a couple of films that were a Stan Laurel production and something that he did at the Roach Studios. So he had a little bit more lofty of a title for a couple of those. One of them is Way Out West. Now, when they went over to 20th Century Fox, that was a whole different situation. That wasn't a small production company. That was a huge studio. And Stan Laurel, I guess naively, expected to be able to direct the director and be in on the editing room and so forth. And because he wasn't, he had a certain disdain for that period of his career, unfortunately. The films themselves were good. It didn't harm his performance. He contributed greatly as an actor, but he was no longer given the sort of creative control. Creative contribution, yes. Creative control, no, not so much. So, and that's covered in the book, and I discussed that with each film during that period. But Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were not just guys who showed up and did what they were told. They had a creative contribution to their work.
Absolutely right, which again is indelible and lasts today. And Flying Deuces was another funny one.
Yeah. They joined the Foreign Legion when Hardy's jilted by a woman that he's fallen in love with, and when they get to the Foreign Legion, they get in trouble with the commander right away and are given these impossible tasks to do, like wash all the Legionnaire uniforms. And there's this magnificent, the director is Eddie Sutherland, and there's this magnificent establishing shot where they show this big, wide bunch of clotheslines of all these clothes and Laurel and Hardy in front of them with a washboard washing them. It's just a brilliant shot and really funny.
Absolutely right. You just laugh when you even think about the two of them together because of their just phenomenal way that they had.
They have a great, Flying Deuces has a great ending too, where throughout the movie, they mention where, about reincarnation, where Hardy says, you know what? I like horses. I'd be happy to come back as a horse.
As a horse.
And Laurel says, I want to come back as me. I always got along great with me.
Right.
So, and at the end of the movie, there's a plane crash, and Laurel crawls out, and Hardy, they see floating up to heaven with angel wings and a harp and everything. And then the next scene, Laurel's walking along alone, and he hears Hardy's familiar voice go, Stan! And he looks up, and there's a big white horse with a derby and a little mustache going, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. Laurel loved his surreal endings.
And, you know, and some of those phrases, those catchphrases have become part of our culture.
Yeah.
People say those things to each other, you know, during certain scenarios. County Hospital was another funny one.
Oh, yeah, a real funny one. Hardy is sitting there with a broken leg on a pulley, and then the doctor comes in to examine him, and Laurel picks up the pulley weight from the floor, and Hardy's leg comes down, bang, on on the doctor, and it hurts him. So the doctor runs over by Laurel and says, don't pick that up. And he goes holding it, flying out the window, hanging by the pulley, which is hoisting Hardy up by his broken leg. I mean, that's genius. Who comes up with that gag? That's really hilarious and so outrageously destructive.
Right. Saps at Sea.
Yeah, Saps at Sea. That was the last film they made for Hal Roach before going over and changing to 20th Century Fox. So that's a very significant film.
It is. This one is too, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
Bullfighters. This is
Bullfighters, yeah. That was
45.
their last American film made for 20th Century Fox. And an actor who was in it, Richard Lane, who has since died, but I knew him back in the 70s. And he told me that a couple of the gag sequences in the Bullfighters, Laurel was allowed to direct. So he was getting creative input and control because they got a director named Malcolm St. Clair who was sympathetic to Laurel's interest in contributing. And so he got to contribute more and more as they went on. And in the Bullfighters, there were two gag sequences that Laurel directed.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is really tough to decide on all these films, and we were just really scratching the surface on, you know, a few of them, Tit for Tat, and
that was the sequel to Them There Hills I was talking about.
That was Tit for Tat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And The Live Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another. But there's so many. It is really hard to pick a favorite. You just have to. There's bits in all of them, little pieces of all of them. Of course, Sons of the Desert is another classic that just stand out. And you know, everybody has their own personal favorites, but you know, we were the lucky ones. We are the lucky ones having them and having all of this on celluloid, now digitized, I'm sure, as well, which brings a whole other element and it introduces it to other generations along the way, too. But we're so lucky that their output was tremendous. Even when I was putting this episode together, I was, you know, boggled by the amount. I knew there was a lot and I've seen so many of them, but I forgot over, you know, like 107.
Yeah, yeah. They made a lot of films, and we have a lot to work with and to watch and enjoy over time and generations. I participated maybe 10, 12 years ago in a big chalk drawing thing, you know, one summer downtown. I was one of the artists participating, and I decided on my big, giant cement slab to draw Laurel and Hardy, you know, with a, you know, in chalk with a background and everything. It's pretty cool looking. And as I was drawing it, this little kid comes over, this little girl comes over, and her face lights up. Wow. And then some other kids, probably brothers and sisters, came up and had the same reaction. And then their dad comes up and he goes, oh, hey. And then he says to me, we're big fans. And that made me feel so good that this dad was showing Laurel and Hardy films to his children. Because like I said before, that's another generation that's watching them and loving them and keeping them alive. Someday those children will likely show the Laurel and Hardy films to their kids. You know, long after we're gone, people are still going to be watching Laurel and Hardy films. And I think that's wonderful how timeless they are. That's great comedy. When something can be made in 1932 and later come up, uh, still be funny 90 years later, that's terrific.
It really is, and it brings you back to a more innocent time. And I've talked to relatives who were around in those time periods when a lot of those were being made and what it was like. And one uncle mentioned something about it was such a thing, especially during the Depression. It was such an important thing and something that people look forward to, getting out of the house or the apartments in the cities and going into what were beautiful, elaborate movie theaters that they were really something. And some of them were even air conditioned, and how important that was during
Yeah.
that time to go into these lush, beautiful, glamorous movie theaters and the popcorn and the air conditioning, and to escape and watch a Laurel and Hardy or any of these other epic blockbuster films of the day, the golden age of Hollywood. It was an event. And these people that were on the large screens, bigger than life, revered. Now everything is quick clips and digitized, well, not digitized, but quick clips, and there's a lot of media out there. There's internet and social media and 400 million TV channels and movies and streaming and so much blur. But back then, if you were on the big screen, you were something else, right?
Oh, absolutely. But one of the things that I do like about the modern era is that you can go to something like YouTube or one of those outlets, and you can find Laurel and Hardy movies. Now, I had a friend of mine, that I would put on my Facebook page a link to YouTube of a Laurel and Hardy comedy. And a teacher friend of mine who taught, I believe it was second grade, would show the movie in her class. It was like a thing we did. And then at the end of the year, I'd come in to her classroom and I'd draw a picture of Laurel and Hardy or whomever for the kids, and just real little kids. And the films that I would put on YouTube, it wasn't just Laurel and Hardy. It was also, Three Stooges and things like that for the kids to enjoy. And that was just a special end of the year, sort of like what I did when I was still teaching. And when I would do that, these little kids would go to YouTube and find other Laurel and Hardy movies and come back and report to the teacher. I showed my mom and dad Laurel and Hardy. Even the parents were too young for Laurel and Hardy at this point. And yeah, they thought they were funny too. And so it's neat to be able to do something like that, that through whatever connection, it gets to younger kids like that who will look on YouTube and explore further. And that's what
Right.
keeps these movies alive. I always emphasize that it's always great when teachers or parents or grandparents will introduce these wonderful timeless movies
Mm.
to their children, so that those children will grow up and introduce it to their children, because these movies were old to me too. I mean, I wasn't around for Laurel and Hardy movies. So as a result, they're just as old that, they might be further back for the younger generation, but they're old movies to all of us, and we can all enjoy them as classics.
Exactly. So, right, the technology of today opens it up to new generations, and they can do research and enjoy, not have, maybe they wouldn't have had this exposure to it all. And that's one of the great things about it. Like you say, I agree 100%. Would you say the Laurel and Hardy films, Stan, of course, coming from England, and Oliver from Georgia, right? Georgia?
Yes.
Would you say that they were as popular in Great Britain and other parts of the world as they were in America and maybe Canada? Or was this the place for most of their mass popularity? Was it a global thing?
Yes, it was very much a global thing. It was throughout the world. There's all kinds of things I found where different countries were responding to them as passionately as American audiences were.
James, I always wondered if there are descendants of Laurel and Hardy that may still be around, and if you've ever had any communication with the families, if they've ever known of your work, or you've just had opportunities to chat with any of the relatives of either one.
As a matter of fact, now Hardy had no children, but Stan Laurel had a daughter named Lois, and I knew her pretty well. She was a very, very nice lady, and I think her granddaughter, so it would be Laurel's great granddaughter. However it works. She's, I believe, on social media, and she tries to help keep the memory alive of Laurel and Hardy.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. Hopefully she'll see this, and how we're, celebrating the two, but also all of their films and their contributions as well. So in the annals of history, they are right up there, aren't they?
Yeah, as far as cinema's history is concerned, I really think they're right up there with the classic stars of the 30s and 40s, and well, all the way back to the silent era. For comedy, I think they're right up there with the greats like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. And for movies in general, I really think they're right up there with, Clark Gable, Betty Davis, Humphrey Bogart, Jimmy Cagney, any of those, Barbara Stanwyck, any of those great, great, great people. John Wayne, I think Laurel and Hardy fit right in with all those great stars that are still beloved today.
What do you hope people are left with when they read this incredible book? And congratulations on it, the Laurel and Hardy Films. What do you hope that when they read, whether they're somebody who's an expert on Laurel and Hardy, or somebody who, again, will be learning a lot about them upon reading this incredible text, what do you hope they're left with? What was your vision when you were writing?
Well, if somebody checks it out of the library because they saw a couple of Laurel and Hardy movies and would like to see more, I hope they are inspired to seek them out more and learn more about them and appreciate all of their work. Watch more of their movies. And for somebody who loves Laurel and Hardy and has seen the films countless times, I hope they're inspired by a fellow Laurel and Hardy fan's work. I hope they appreciate some of the background information that I provide that might not be found elsewhere. And I hope they get a better understanding and a deeper appreciation than what they already have for what I consider the greatest comedians of all time.
So true, my friend. So true. And I want to make mention to our viewers that in addition to, a 30-year teaching career where our very special guest, James, taught everything from English and speech drama to self-contained special ed classes for the most challenging students in the district. He continues to write books and articles on film history full time. And he recently signed the contract to write that 40th book. He has published books on everyone from Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton to Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, Bruce Willis, and of course, Jerry Lewis as well, and so many others. You're having a good time reliving and learning about all of these incredible people in our world, huh?
It's, I guess, if you love the work and you're fascinated by the work, it's like you get closer to the subject when you work on a book on anybody, because you're looking at their films and you're learning about their life. And in the case of Bruce Willis, you get closer to him, and then you realize what he's going through now. I mean, he's like the same age as me, and it's really very heartbreaking. And then in the case of an old comedian named Andy Clyde, who made films all the way back to the Keystone comedies and did a great series of comedies at Columbia. Those are the films that I discussed in my book on him. Just like me. Now, I told you earlier how I was widowed. I also lost my son when he was only in his 30s. So Andy Clyde lost a son, and I somehow connected with him at that level, and that made me feel closer to him. So there's certain things that happen where you don't just love the work, you start to really connect with the person when you study them that closely, study their work and their lives that closely.
That's beautifully said and eloquently said as well. And yeah, it brings you closer to these people that we've admired, we've been curious about, who have entertained us, put smiles on our faces, made us think and laugh and cry, and are part of our lives from childhood all the way on. And you continue to do that in grand style, and you're inspiring countless generations with your body of work as well, James. And congratulations on all of that, keeping these memories alive of these extraordinary people, including the beloved Laurel and Hardy. This was a terrific conversation. We encourage folks to get the book. There you go. Read it cover to cover, literally. How did you design the cover and the back of the book?
Oh, the publisher I have has a magnificent designer, layout and design person.
Nice job.
So I send the materials to Robbie. I pick out the photos. I send her the photos and where they're to be placed, and the captions, and of course the text. And she puts together the design. And this book, which is almost 600 pages, it's huge.
It's a definitive, yeah.
She put together the most wonderful layout, and I was so pleased with it. I mean, it got to the point where I told both her and my publisher, if she stops designing books, I'm going to quit writing them.
Right. It's a wonderful relationship that you have. And bearmanormedia.com, you can get the book there. Also, I believe Amazon and other places where books are sold, my friend, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I imagine it's used as a reference too, right? Not just for entertainment, but people use it as a reference when teaching.
A lot of people, a lot of people have told me that they, sometimes, some film buffs, especially younger ones, because they can access, they want to see every movie that a particular favorite actor made. And I think that's really cool that they take the time to do that. It takes them a long time because, you have a life and work and things. But the people that do that, if it's an actor that I've written about, they've told me that they've used my book as they watch the films as a reference source. And many times I found my books in other books, bibliographies and so forth, being used for their projects. So that's always very gratifying.
Good stuff, James. Truly a real pleasure having you on our show. And thanks for sharing all these great stories and a little bit about behind the scenes of these amazing films. We just literally scratched the surface on many, many, many of these films. There's so many, we could do a whole mini series on it, but some of the ones that people remember and people love. And, there could be a lot of films out there that Laurel and Hardy did that people haven't even seen yet, or they missed, or they didn't even know existed. And now they're going to go and check it all out and dig deeply and watch and have some laughs, which is fantastic, because that's what Laurel and Hardy hoped would happen. And all these years later still happens. And we are, again, the ones who benefit from it all. And you, again, are a brilliant artist. For folks who didn't see this earlier, this is the work of James Neibaur. Really incredible. And good stuff, my friend. Really, I hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I have with you, going down memory lane and sharing this and celebrating you, your incredible work, and your book as well. And we're going to keep that porch light on for you. You're back here anytime you want, my friend. Definitely come back. We could talk about Jerry Lewis. We could talk about, Elvis. We've had some family members of Elvis here on the show as well. There's a lot we can go down as you celebrate these iconic people. Hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I have with you, James. It was a pleasure.
I absolutely did. And I would be happy to come back anytime you're doing a subject in which I can be helpful as a contributor. I would welcome the opportunity to come back and spend some time with you, Jim.
The pleasure is all mine. Spread the word about our show as well. And again, congratulations on everything, James. And do you still have your buddy there with you?
Yep.
He started the show. He kicked it all off.
All right.
Does he have any last words for us too?
Here's another nice mess you've got me into.
The Jim Masters Show. Well, Gilligan just wanted to say hello as well.
I interviewed Bob Denver back in the 80s. He was a really nice guy.
He really was. And his lovely bride, Dreama Denver, who's a friend of ours, and she was on our show a couple of times. She gifted me with this bobblehead, and she autographed it there as well. And she said, on your set, you're missing something. I said, what are we missing? She said, you're missing the Bob Denver, Gilligan. So Gilligan says hello to Oliver Hardy there. And Barbara Eden is sleeping right over there in the genie bottle. There she is.
Boy,
right
yeah, how come I don't get a gig like that? Barbara Eden is sleeping over there. I never.
I noticed even more of a smile on Hardy's face when he heard genie in the bottle. Right. I mean, where did you get that? That is so cool.
Somebody gave it to me as a gift a long time ago, and I thought, this is great. Thanks.
That is so awesome. Terrific way to begin the show and to wrap it. Well, gentlemen, thank you for the time, and come see us again. And truly, James, a real pleasure, and best of luck on everything. Congratulations on the book. Folks can go again to bearmanormedia.com and Amazon and everywhere books are sold to look for that. And it really is a page turner. Like you said, 600 pages. There it is, the Laurel and Hardy Films. And they are, he took a leap. His battery went out.
Yeah.
James, thank you very much. Go get a sandwich. You earned it. You sang for your supper. A real pleasure. And come see us again real soon, my friend. Okay.
All right, Jim. Thanks. Anytime.
All right. You be well. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. James Neibaur joining us here on the Jim Masters Show as we celebrate his extraordinary book, The Laurel and Hardy Films. And this, again, is 600 pages of pure pleasure. And if you love everything Laurel and Hardy, this is a definitive book to add to your collection. He dissects all the films, film by film by film, and a deep dive and in a loving way. Some wonderful personal stories he shared about his own life as well, and his love for the industry, his love for these people, his wonderful artwork as well. 30 years himself as an educator. James, we really appreciate him being on the show. Hey, drop a comment below. What is your favorite Laurel and Hardy film? Do you have your favorite? Of course, Babes in Toyland, March of the Wooden Soldiers is a favorite of many. Widely known, globally beloved, but do you have a favorite as well? And what are your favorite Laurel and Hardy memories? Why do you love them so much? Or did you learn something new about them by watching this episode of the Jim Masters Show and a very special guest sharing some fantastic nuggets about the two gentlemen and the films too, the making of the films, behind the scenes, everything that happened, working with Hal Roach and 20th Century and all the rest. Good stuff, right? If you enjoyed this episode, gang, we would love it if you give the episode a thumbs up like on our YouTube channel. There's a little like button there, a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV. We would love that. There's thousands of episodes to enjoy. And also share this on your social media and leave a comment. Drop a comment below. What you enjoy about our show, but also tell us about some of your favorite Laurel and Hardy memories. We would love to hear that, love to know that. That would be a real pleasure. And they are, again, two legends, two classics. And we celebrate them here on the show. But and we're going to have James back with us because, again, he's written about so many other incredible, iconic figures in American entertainment, in film, in television, in music, and so much more. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Take care of one another, love one another. Don't forget to do the very same for yourself. We say it all the time here on the Jim Masters Show. We thank everybody who helps to make this show the success that it is. We love your comments, your support, sharing, liking, subscribing. It means the world to us, helps us grow too. And wherever you're watching around the world, we thank you for your time this time. Till next time here on the Jim Masters Show. Come see us again, everybody. We love you all. Take care and be well. And cheers.